of Education regular meeting. It is Thursday, February the 24th, 2022, and the time is 6 p.m. Let the minutes reflect that all 5 board members are present in the building. I'd like to ask Mr. Brogan to do invocation and pledge of allegiance, please.
Our Father in heaven, we just want to thank you, Lord, for giving us another day. Thank you so much, Lord, for many blessings that you bestow upon us. Lord, we are glad to take things for granted. Pray that you just help us not to do that. Lord, we thank you for all the folks that are here tonight, show their interest in the business dealings of the Board of Education. We thank you for each one. God, we thank you for the staff. One side or the other as far as the staff, employees of the county go, God. We're thankful for each one. Each one has a job to do and they do it well. We're thankful for that. Lord, we just pray that you be with us tonight as we go through this agenda. May we give each bullet proper attention and make the best decision for the school's system be made. We pray all these things in Jesus' name.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will now take up item number 3, approval agenda with adjustments. The chair moves that McGraw-Hill bills and payment to Stanley Duncan be considered together and separate from remaining bills. Motion on the floor of the chair, seconded by Mr. McBride, that the bills for McGraw-Hill and Stanley Duncan bill be considered together and separate from remaining bills. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 I need R.T. Rogers, make a motion, we pull R.T. Rogers to be voted on separately as well.
Chair seconds that. There's a motion on the floor of Mr. Brogan, seconded by the chair, that this board, when considering bills, consider bills from R.T. Rogers separate from all other bills. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 5 votes in the affirmative. Both of these motions have been made regarding paying of bills, so the agenda has been adjusted for those items. Do any other members have any adjustments they wish to put forth to this agenda that has been presented to us by the superintendent?
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda as read with the aforementioned changes.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Brogan, seconded by Mr. Angel. This board approve the agenda as presented to this board by the superintendent, noting the 2 motions that provided for adjustments to the agenda. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? 5 votes in affirmative. The agenda has been approved. Item 4, pause for applause. Student success stories. ProStart program is assisting the cooks with breakfast and lunch prep. Superintendent Warble.
We're going to have Mr. Hudgens come up and speak. The students and our teacher could not make it tonight, so we're going to push that to the next board meeting to pause for applause. But Mr. Hudgens still would like to speak about it, so he can inform you guys of something that's upcoming that you all might be interested in.
Thank you. Yeah, Ms. Serval and the students were unable to make it tonight, but I did want to speak on their behalf. You know, they have really stepped up their game in the last several months here. They've provided lunches for a couple of steering meetings for the community. They have served breakfast for staff, and they've done lunch meals for the staff. And we're also beginning a after lunch snack where they can go out and sell to students during the after lunchtime. What Ms. Serval asked for me to do, and I got to check with Mr. Warble as far as the open Meetings Act or whatever, but I would like to invite you five to a lunch here at the school prepared by the First Start class. And that will be within the next few weeks. So if you could make that, we would really, I think the best way to see the hard work they're doing is actually being in the restaurant and see them doing it. So I would really appreciate if you guys could come down.
If I may ask, is that for one day only, for one period, or are you going to set that up? You'd have to set that up 3 different times because no more than 2 board members could attend at one time, and then you'd have an odd man out.
So I
I
can't.
think we could check the tray on that up there, we could get as long as there's no
You,
decision.
you guys can be in the same room together, as long as there's no discussion about anything other than eating and, observing what's going on. It'd be like if you guys came to a basketball game, a football game, even if you came to, like, there was a play tonight, and you sat, it would not be smart to sit together, but it would be smarter to keep 2 at a table and spread out, and then no business would be done. It would only be the kids talking to you about what's going on in the school system. But Trey will be in our office next week, working with us, so we can bring that to his attention, and he'll give us legal counsel on that.
If you would, and if you would communicate that legal advice to each board member via email,
I will.
I would tend to beg to differ on that. We would all know there'd be no business discussed, but the mere fact that 5 of us are in a room at one time with the people out there who are constantly attacking this board for no reason, all they need to know is that 5 board members were in a building in a room together at one time. But we will defer to council, that's what we pay them for, so you let us know, okay?
Sure. Is that all, Mr. Hedges?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for the invite.
Yeah,
It's not that we
thank
don't
you.
want to come.
We appreciate that.
Now we're on item 5, presentations. And we have Dr. Edwards, Instructional Initiatives. First, Superintendent Warble.
We're gonna have Dr. Edwards go over what he's been working with us the last year and a half, give you guys an update on the happenings of working with this gentleman to help us with student achievement. We will have some scores to report to you soon about our benchmarks. And what I'm liking so far that we're seeing is we do have some growth. So, I would like to tell you that it's gonna be pervasive and throughout the whole county, but, we'll just have to be cautiously optimistic. But until we get to that point, I want Dr. Edwards to be able to go over all the things that he's been doing with our principals, our leadership, team at the central office, and then the teachers as well. And then if you have any questions, please, I already told him I'm gonna allow him to be peppered tonight, and he gets paid to take these tough questions on. He already knows DOK level 4 questions with curveballs, so he's good to go. So you can have fun with him tonight, okay?
Dr. Edwards, we'd like to welcome you to our meeting tonight. For those who don't know, Dr. Edwards is world-renowned for his work with developing instructional initiatives, and we're happy to have you here tonight. So you have the floor, sir, and we'll see if we're smart enough to come up with any questions to ask you. We'll try.
Okay, well, thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Warfield, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here this evening, have a chance to talk to you and those in attendance this evening. The things that we've been working on, there's a multi-pronged approach. And the multi-pronged approach, I think, serves us very well to get the maximum opportunity for movement and growth around student achievement. So what we do is, each month when I come, we spend time visiting classrooms. Primarily the classrooms of the teachers that I've been working with directly, and those teachers who are new to the district, which, as you well know, you have quite a few new teachers to the county. And if I'm with the elementary schools, you know, Ms. Jones goes with me, and if I'm at the secondary, Mr. Coons goes with me. And sometimes Mr. Orville tags along as well. And after that, the next day, what we do is I usually meet with central office to talk about where we're at, thinking about some things that we're working on, where we want to go, what we observed during our walkthroughs. Then in the afternoon, I meet with the principals. And during that time, we're working on instructional practices, instructional strategies, and how they can take those practices and go back and implement them in their classrooms, with their staff. We also talk about the walkthroughs, what we saw, the positives, some of the challenges, etc., and ways that they can provide additional support to their staff. Usually on the third day, what we do is I spend a half day with a group of lead teachers. These are some veteran teachers in the county who have exhibited themselves as exceptional educators. They're not the only ones in the county, of course, but they're a group that I've been working with. And one of the things that they do is they go back and share what we work on with their peers back at the school. And then in the afternoon, I meet with a group of new teachers, those that are first year, second year in the county, and we provide support for them, training for them on instructional practices, instructional strategies that they can then go back and implement in the classroom. Come back the next month, we go and look for those practices to be embedded in those classes as we do our walkthroughs. Tomorrow you have a professional learning day for the entire day, and I'll be spending the day with a group of new teachers. They had an opportunity to sign up, and I believe we had 25 sign up, Ms. Jones, is that correct? So we had 25 new teachers sign up to be part of that training, and that'll allow us to expand this. As you well know, it's difficult to free teachers up during school days, substitutes, etc. But that has been kind of the model from month to month. And we've seen significant growth in our new teachers, a group of veteran teachers. We've got one of your new teachers sitting up here in the audience, Mr. Sampson. I'll give you a shout out. Mr. Sampson joined the county, as you well know, from private industry and has just jumped in and been a sponge. And I was in his class just last week and extremely impressed with the learning strategies he was using, focusing on higher order learning activities. Your bell ringer was outstanding, Mr. Sampson, so I got to give you a shout out for that. And I know that he's collaborating with Ms. Holt, who's another outstanding member of your staff. And Ms. Holt and I spent some time working with her on a grant today that she's applying for to provide some support to the mathematics program here at the high school. We're doing some even cross-county collaboration that I think is not only benefiting your teachers, but benefiting teachers elsewhere around the region. And I feel strongly that it's not a competition between counties. We all want to help each other because we want to help kids. And if we can all share our expertise and that benefits children, then that's better for everyone. So I'll pause there and take any questions you have or comments.
Any questions? Dr. Edwards, what assessment could you relay to us that you're doing that would reaffirm what you feel is being effective in your work with our teachers? How are you assessing that?
Well, what I do is assess the implementation of the strategies that I share with them. And then we provide feedback based on how they have implemented a particular strategy. As recently as this morning, I introduced a new strategy to a group of lead teachers. We practiced, I put them through the experience as I would, a teacher would put a group of students through that. Then they have a chance to practice that. I did the same thing with the principals. So now I'll go and look for that strategy being applied or some modification of that in their classrooms.
Could you give us a general accounting or maybe a specific of what instructional techniques you're finding that you need to put forth the most? What are the perceived weaknesses of things that you see your initiative helping improve?
Okay, sure. And what I'm going to share is not unique to Summers County. It's not unique to Southern West Virginia or West Virginia. It's some things that are pretty common in most schools that I've worked with around the country and elsewhere. One of those things is increasing academic rigor. Much of what we see in our classrooms in this country and here in Summers County is a lot of lower recall learning. So, I'll give you an example. 16th part of the United States. There's one answer, it's Abraham Lincoln. You either know it or you don't know it. That's very basic recall learning. So what I'm working with the staff on is to increase academic rigor, where we are now taking skills, concepts, knowledge, and applying it in new and different situations, so that they're able to make connections across, not only within one content area, but across content areas, and also having a real-world application to those skills and concepts. I think that is critically important. The other piece of that is having it being relevant to the students, which increases student engagement. And relevance means, to me, what's relevant to a 15-year-old child in Hinton, West Virginia, or Summers County, West Virginia, may not be the same thing to a kid in Denver, Colorado. Some things are similar, but you've got to make the learning meaningful. And when learning's meaningful, it sticks, it stays, and children benefit.
Questions, anyone else?
So, could you give us just a brief example of a strategy that you have had implemented here in our school system?
Sure, I had one, my last visit, some of the teachers implemented it. I shared it on a Friday and implemented it on Monday. And I call it a progressive math problem. So what I did with the teachers is put a post-it board, flip chart paper around the room. So when they came in, there's flip chart paper around the room, and on that flip chart paper was a mathematics problem. I went with a 4th grade example. I didn't want to embarrass anybody who might struggle with a more complicated problem. So, because not everybody's a math teacher. So I put those problems up, and then they were divided up into small groups, 2 to 3 people. Along with that was taped up something called the Bucks method. The Bucks method is a way of analyzing a word problem. These were all word problems that for 4th grade are higher order problems. They're more rigorous learning, they're more rigorous problems. So we divided up at each of the flip chart papers, and each group had to do the first step of that problem. Then you rotate. You go and you've got to check to see if the last group did the first portion of that problem correctly. If they didn't, you've got to make the adjustment. Now each group has a different color marker, so I know which group did what, made what modification. They check that first step, then they do the second step, and subsequently work around the room. They come back to their original problem, they take that, and they have to justify why that problem was done correctly. If it was not done correctly, what adjustments they would make, and make those adjustments. So some of them went and implemented that the next school day they had. Then I always have them list the number of skills that are embedded in that activity. And they're not just content skills. They're life skills, they're career skills, I call them cornerstone skills. Comparing, contrasting information is a cornerstone skill. Working with a partner is a life skill, collaboration. So we did an activity today, and I think we listed, I don't know, something like 12 or 14 skills that were embedded in that learning. That's much different than me standing up in front of the kids and saying, well, here's how we're going to do this problem. The way that I just explained that, the teacher acts as a facilitator of learning rather than the person providing direct instruction. Now, that doesn't mean direct instruction doesn't take place. When and where needed, it's depending how students work through that problem. A teacher may step back and say, we need to have the whole class work on this piece. Does that help?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Sure.
Additional questions? Dr. Edwards, these 2 questions I have, I think they're germane, but if they're not, I won't be offended if you tell me they're not, okay?
Okay.
When you are working with our teachers and you're considering the standards of our curriculum, are you finding that teachers are aware or improving on the fact that when you consider standards A to Z, you sometimes have to do triage on those, and by that I mean you might not get to X, Y, and Z or R because somewhere in the A through G are such developmental foundational skills that you can't possibly do X, Y, and Z into those foundations. Could you reflect on that any, or is that an appropriate question?
No, that's a very, very appropriate question, a very appropriate question. What we've done, when I started with the beginning, when I started working with the school district and first started with the principals, we looked to identify what we call priority standards. It's next to impossible in a 180-day school year to hit all standards with fidelity. For example, there are 44 mathematics standards in 3rd grade. To hit all of those with fidelity is next to impossible. So what we do is we work collectively to say which of those standards are priority standards that are critical for our children to be able to be successful at. But we also have to look at that, if that's a 3rd grade standard, we've got to look at 12th grade and say, what components, what are those skills in 12th grade that are developed in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, all the way up, and obviously from kindergarten. So we identify priority standards, then what we do is deconstruct those standards and identify the skills and concepts embedded in each of those standards. From there, we build a matrix that requires the teachers to create learning activities at each of the 4 levels of complexity. What has happened is Ms. Jones as we do these, we do a peer review, principals do a review, right, Al? Then I take a portion of them and I double check them. After they've been examined at multiple levels, they're placed on a shared drive. So now we have that opportunity for teachers to take and look at that shared drive and pull from those that we have deconstructed, built a matrix, and we also build an assessment, we also build learning activities. In essence, what you're doing is building your own curriculum based on the standards.
You answered that question very well, thank you, and that's very reassuring. And,
Thank you.
so you're seeing that more and more of our teachers are grasping that concept then, and they are employing it.
Absolutely, and I got to commend Al and the other principals for following up with this work. Tomorrow, Al, you'll be spending time on just what I just talked about with your teachers. So training the principals to be effective with this, and then a team of lead teachers and some of the new teachers, they can support this when they go back and have PD days or their PLCs, their faculty meetings, etc.
I have one last thing, and while I'm doing this, if the other members or anybody has questions, formulate them, and you can ask that question just in a minute. How well are you seeing our teachers do cross-curricular instruction, whereby the opportunities, say, in social studies, which affords many ELA skills teaching opportunity, how much of that are you seeing? You getting resistance to that? Could you just fill us in on that a little bit?
Sure. When they build the matrix, which looks at the 4 levels of academic rigor, the highest level is 4. At level 4, you're creating an interdisciplinary learning experience. So you're typically covering at least 2, 3, and even 4 disciplines. And then we build an assessment based on that level. So as the teachers are developing these, they're making more frequent use of that type of learning, which involves multiple content areas. You still might be teaching math, which is your primary content area, but you're saying, I can put a science component in here. I might be able to put a social studies component in here, whatever. And we're seeing more and more of that. That takes time to develop, but we are seeing progress in that, and we're seeing more and more teachers looking at those higher levels of complexity and building learning activities around that. Just as recently as, I don't know, Adam, you sent me an email with pictures. Again, Mr. Sampson, they're going to think that you're the second coming here. But Mr. Sampson has engaged his students in an activity all mathematically based, but where they're applying mathematical concepts to a redesign of the courtyard right out here. That's real learning. That's they're developing budgets, they're developing requisition forms, they're taking all, mathematics then comes to life for them.
And my son is in that class, so I've heard about that.
Has he enjoyed it?
He has, yes.
See, when children come home and talk about those kinds of things at school, that's gotta be reassuring as a parent.
Well, that's great project-based learning.
Yes,
Activities and
PBL.
cross-curricular, and I would just like to say that Superintendent Wardle and the principals have been bringing in teachers who are doing demonstrations to us, and I can tell you're getting around, and I think we are getting fruit harvested from the seeds you're planting, and I think that's wonderful. Anybody else have any questions? I'm gonna shut up. Dr. Edwards, thank you very much for coming.
Well, thanks for having me.
Appreciate your good work, and hope you'll come back and speak to us again as you see more and more progress being made. And if there's
Sure.
anything we can do to help you, please let us know.
Anytime.
Number one goal is student achievement. We want to improve that.
Thank you. And I think one of the best things is having these teachers come in and share the exciting things they're doing, and that's just reinforces, for them, the work that they're putting into this. So thank you very much for your time.
That's been very heartwarming. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Edwards, I appreciate you
Thank you.
answering those questions.
The next presentation is Adam Kuhn and Mr. Hudgens, Progressive Discipline.
As they walk up, basically the progressive discipline is just talking about how we've gone from last school year, putting 3 grade levels into a 4 grade level building, going 50% of the kids to now 100%. At any given point in time, we have close to 700 people in this building, give or take 50 here and there. But the point is, they're working on a way to try to help kids understand that when they step out of bounds, how do we bring those kids back into bounds? And I'm going to let Mr. Kuhn and Mr. Hudgens talk to you about that.
Well, I'll lead off real quick and then let Mr. Hudgens talk from the school level, then we'll go to the central office level when we deal with school discipline. But Dr. Edwards just left the meeting here, but school discipline begins with great instruction. We are working on that across the board, and in classrooms where we have instruction that he just talked about, we don't have a whole lot of discipline issues. That's the goal in Summers County is to get our instructional methods up to such a high level where kids are engaged in projects like Dr. Edwards alluded to with Mr. Sampson and various other projects. But there are instances where we have to deal with student discipline. Like Mr. Warble said, this is progressive discipline. Our philosophy of discipline is to start off as minimal as possible and then go as the incident dictates. We want to create a place here at Summers County High School where students feel like they belong, where they feel safe, and in reality they are safe. As a parent myself, when I trust the school that my son goes to, and I feel very confident every time he goes out to school every morning. He's just in preschool, so it's a little bit different than being here at the high school. But as parents, we want our children to feel safe, and we want to feel assured that they are safe. So we are trying to create that here at Summers County High School. I'm gonna let Mr. Hudgens talk about his discipline matrix. Okay, and then we'll talk about a discipline here.
All right, in your folders there's 4 pages of progressive discipline and the levels of discipline. The state has in code 4 levels, level 1, 2, 3, 4. And as you see on the bottom of page 18, it's level 1, which are minimally disruptive behaviors. And level 1s are typically, the first 3 offenses are typically handled by the classroom teacher. There's a parent contact, you can look at deceit, cheating, disruptive behavior. The student-teacher conference, that's typically maybe at the end of class, or beginning of class, the teacher will pull the kid aside and say, hey, look, you're being disruptive, coughing in class. I don't want to have to call your mom. I don't want to send you to the office, so I need you to behave. And that's just the teacher-student conference, and the teachers document that. The second offense for disruptive behavior is when they make that phone call home to a parent. And they let the parent know that the child's being disrupted. And they will tell them, you know, I don't want to have to send them to the office. I don't want to have to put them in lunch detention or whatever. So can you help me out at home? And, you know, but then when you get to level, or on level ones, when you get to the fourth and fifth offense, it gradually increases. And in those situations, that's when you will be, a discipline referral would go to our assistant principal over discipline, which is Mr. Todd Lusk. And Mr. Lusk has done a phenomenal job with this. Our dashboard of discipline referrals gets wiped out daily. He takes care of all discipline referrals on a daily basis. As they are put in by teachers, he takes care of that. Now, as far as level twos, you can flip over to the next page. You know, those are disruptive and potentially harmful behaviors. You know, gang activity, technology abuse, habitual violation of school rules. You know, habitual violation of school rules is one of those level twos where maybe the kids had about 5 or 6 or 7 level ones, and you're at the point, well, they're just not complying, and then it becomes a level 2. Insubordination, you can see that's if a teacher tells you to do something, they refuse to comply. We have ISS, and then it can go to OSS pretty quickly on the level 2s. Leaving school without permission, that would be more for the high school age kids. If a kid hops in their car and leaves without permission, they lose their parking permit, the parents notified immediately, and they also get ISS, and that's for the first offense. I mean, as we all know, that's a liability, and we can't accept that if kids do that type of stuff, so we're pretty stern on that. Profane acts or language, you can see the discipline, ISS, in-school suspension, that would be with Coach Franklin. ISS, out of school suspension. Fights, you can see the first fight, it doesn't matter. You know, the severity of it, it's up to 5 days OSS, and we actually do 5 days for that fight if there's a fight. Second time, third time, you can see how it progresses. And it's kind of leads me to level 3. Level 3 is a battery against a student. That's maybe a one-sided assault where a kid is injured. That's level 3, intimately dangerous, illegal, or aggressive behavior. These are a lot of times when law enforcement can get involved. Defacing school property, larceny, hazing, improper use of a vehicle, false fire alarm, trespassing, forgery, sexual misconduct, and threat against a school employee or a student. And you can see like almost all these would be OSS or a possible alternative placement. Harassment, bullying, intimidation. First offense, parents contacted, the issues investigated. We refer the situation to guidance, and there's a possible suspension. And then you can see how that progresses. We also have imitation drugs and possession of nicotine. That one has actually changed in our first LSIC meeting. We increased the first offense to 5 days of ISS because we wanted to make sure kids aren't vaping. And they also get a fine for that first offense. So if a kid's caught vaping at school property, they're put in school suspension, and they're also receiving about a $200 fine from the city. And we decided that at the LSIC meeting. Now the fourth one, level 4, are the Safe Schools Act behaviors. That's assault and battery on a school employee, felonies, illegal substances related behaviors, and possession of a firearm or deadly weapon, which is a knife longer than 3.5 inches. Those typically would come to you guys for expulsion. Those other forms. So, but we handle some alt-ed. We do have an alt-ed program now at the school level, but I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Coon so you can share how that goes. But before that, I just want to say, when we get to the point where we feel a kid needs alt-ed placement based on administrative meetings or SAT meetings, then we fill out an alternative school packet, which he's going to go over, and then he takes it from there. And the administrators, whether it's myself, Mr. Vickers, Ms. Cochran, or Mr. Lusk, will come up and meet with him for alt-ed placements.
Well, with that being said, I want to commend you all, the Board of Education, for allowing us to have the alternative school program here on campus during school hours. That is it's a really valuable asset here at Summers County, the fact that we can have that setting for learning for students who need that adjustment, but go on the buses to and from school, have lunch here, and not have to come after school. That's been extremely successful. There's 2 teachers out there, as Mr. Hudgens mentioned. Mr. Franklin is the ISS teacher. He's there as well as Ms. Buckland is hired as the alternative school teacher. They kind of tag team that setting, and it's been very beneficial to have both of those out there. But in your packets should be a discipline hearing referral packet. That should be in your folders. I'll call your attention to 2 sections. They're on the first page. The administrators are required to attach those items on the bottom. They're next to the bottom. The WEBIS discipline report, that's their yearly report of their discipline, their attendance, their transcripts, and in any other documentation they have regarding incidents, like teacher documentation, conference notes, those types of things. Because we want to consider all the possible issues that could be going on with this child. When it comes to the point where they're in my office, we want to see if we can curb the behavior, because at that point we're making a determination whether to move that kid to the alternative school program or not. But ultimately, even if they go to the alternative program, Ms. Buckland and Coach Franklin can reach that kid sort of on a more one-on-one level. That's the benefit of that program. The second part I'll call your attention to is the second page. When they come to my office for a discipline hearing, I expect them to have many of those items checked. Classroom interventions, an IEP meeting if that's a student with an IEP, the administrator conference, parent-teacher conference. I just don't want to see in-school and out-of-school suspensions. I want to know that parents have been contacted, that the teacher and student have met, that the administrator and the student have met, that there's been steps taken before they get to that point. Because like we said, this is progressive discipline. The purpose of us enforcing discipline in our schools is not just to be bouncers. We're not bouncers. We are educators. And we are trying to educate our students in not only academics, but in thriving in society as well. So just to wrap this up, once these steps have been taken, should we determine that the child will best be served in the alternative setting, we'll make that determination at the hearing in my office, and then they will begin placement out at the alternative school. We've had a few meetings this year where Dr. Knott and I have both been in those meetings because it's dealt with an IEP or a 504. We could still make that transition, it just has to be handled a little bit differently with laws with students with disabilities. So we try to handle this as collaboratively as possible and student-centered most important. Are there any questions from the board?
Any questions by any members?
How much time between first and second offenses is there before the slate's wiped clean? So is this per grade period, per semester?
It's for the whole year.
How do you mean as far as if an offense is wiped off the?
Between offenses, I mean, how long does that stick before?
Well, their record on WEBIS will still reflect that offense, but I mean, if you were targeted for class in September and you had nothing until May, that's a whole different incident than if you've had day after day after day after that. Yeah.
And in the matrix, there's at the beginning of each section, it does say that it's at the administrator's discretion. If we feel like it's a situation where a kid, maybe 6 months ago did something and then 6 months later did the same thing, we might not be as harsh on that child because it's been such a long time. But that's up to our discretion as administrators how we proceed with that.
That's what I was getting.
Yeah, we can deviate from, or we do deviate from time to time. We try to stay with the matrix so the kids know exactly, this is what I've done and this is what's going to happen if it happens again. But in certain circumstances, that has happened before. We have deviated.
It also depends on the frequency and intensity of it too. So if you're a frequent flyer, you're gonna get in some trouble. If it's, like he said, you did it in the fall and then again in the spring, let's be honest, last week, we had a full moon. I'm not telling you this from the schools, but also from the nursing profession. When I talked to some of our nurses, they said a lot of people's been in the emergency room. Nobody can really have empirical data that says a full moon causes that, but you can almost predict that that week of school, it's gonna be, but you can't put that in a Weavis report saying the excuse is a full moon. Okay, but on a serious note, you do have to look at all surrounding factors. Is there something going on at home? The kid's acting out. Maybe their dog died, so a family member died. They've been evicted from their home. You know, you gotta really look at you gotta look at all the data. But the frequency, if you're doing it all the time, okay, you're not helping yourself. But if it's 1 or 2 instances, it's not a big issue. But once the students graduate from school, the Weavis report and everything, it's wiped clean because now we're done. That does not follow you out of the school system. The only time it could possibly is when there's a felony involved. Other than that, it's wiped clean. So people don't have to feel like that's staying with me for the rest of my life, because that's not what we keep in the final file. We just keep transcript of what you took and what you got, so we can send that on to your business, military, or college.
You know, Mr. Brogan, I was just reiterate what Mr. Warble said. There was a student this year that, you know, we saw a cluster of incidents sort of mid-year. We circled that, you know, that few weeks there, and like, what happened here? Well, my grandmother died. You know, so that's why we're trying to look at the attendance, the discipline, the grades, and everything. Have those conversations with the parents and the families to see, all right, well, we need to learn how to we need to help you cope with whatever happened back here, which may involve communities and schools, our counselors, you know, other influences within the school to help this child, because we don't want to be a bouncer, we want to be an educator. So that's part of it.
Superintendent Warfel, we always need a little levity. So are you saying there's no empirical evidence that under a full moon there are more werewolves?
Not to my knowledge, but I know people have bumper stickers with Sasquatch on it. That's all I'm gonna put. Thanks, Dr. Knott.
You mentioned alternate ed, and that's done here on campus during the school day.
Yes.
In the matrix, it mentions ISS and OSS. So what's the difference in alternate ed versus ISS and OSS?
In-school suspension is going to be a shorter term of serving. Both programs are located back in the CTE building, down in the classroom off of the weight room, if you want some reference there. In-school suspension will be 2-3 days tops typically. When they come to me, or out of school suspension, by the way, it's just you are suspended from school. The alternative school programs, when you've had that pile up of in school, you've had that detention that hasn't worked, in school hasn't worked, suspension hasn't worked, you're back to in school, that hasn't worked, grades could be slipping. That's another benefit of the alternative program. And then we're like, look, nothing's working here. We've got to try something different than what's going on in school. So let's have a hearing in my office, and let's consider making that change. We look at all the data, we consider yes or no, and then those students are dropped off the bus there. They go into that room. I mean, Ms. Buckland does a tremendous job, not just with the behavior part, but with grades. I mean, our grades are going up tremendously in that program. So when they go back into the regular school setting, they come back over to the main building, their grades are up. They have a fighting chance to get up, to have a fresh start, and to move ahead successfully. Most of the kids that we've had to come through that program, I've not heard from since the first year. I mean, there was one I asked about just yesterday when I was over there visiting, and they haven't heard a peep out of this child. That was one that I checked up on just for reference, but it's been quite successful.
When you have a student in alternate ed, on average, what's the time frame they stay in there before they're integrated?
Typically, like 4 weeks. 4 weeks, we come back and review it and see how they've done. So we come back and review to make a determination, and then we see if they're gonna stay another couple weeks or come back out. Just for your reference, 45 days is the limit for a student that's on an IEP, or it's protected under policy 2419. So I don't go, with any kid, I don't go beyond that. I like to go that or shorter. I don't go beyond that, but it also will depend on, in my mind, we have a grading period where it's a natural break. I like to review it before the.
One other thing to just throw out is sometimes what Ms. Buckland does and others, I know Mr. Franklin, there's what they do with a little bit of manual labor to get them to clean, I think at lunchtime, right? After lunch, they clean the tables, they sweep the floors. You know, sometimes it's just refreshing to get out and not stay in a room the whole time either, like a jail. We don't incarcerate, we try to educate them. So the big thing about it is like he said, shorter stints. The destination should not be alternative school. The destination should be out being a kid in the regular school system. So if they're staying there a lot, something's not working, and we need to change that. So the goal is to get them back into the regular school setting. We don't want kids isolated back there.
Members, if you would like to do more in-depth reading, this is Discipline Policy 4373. You can find that online, and you can read in depth to your heart's content on it. We often get questions, board members, about discipline that is or is not taking place. Mr. Cohn, does lunch detention come under the purview of Policy 4373, or is that separate?
That's a consequence.
Pardon?
There'll be a consequence that we could use in 4373.
So it is addressed in 4373?
Yes.
Okay.
It is, because it's not all, they can't encompass all discipline in 4373, but there is a discretion and those can be used. And if there's better ideas, I bet you that principals talk to each other to try to figure a better way to help, because not every discipline matches someone's behavior or attitude towards school.
Is most of the lunch detention, is that administered by the classroom teacher?
Sometimes it is, but most of the time it is,
So sometimes
That's
it's,
the alternative school teacher and the ISS teacher.
so sometimes the classroom teacher will assign lunch detention.
all the lunch detention is assigned by the teacher. We change that each year.
Okay. My question on that is, how is that working out as far as with all the young teachers we have, and are they using lunch detention as a crutch to just send people out of the room rather than to follow appropriate steps of having a student conference and notifying parents, et cetera, et cetera?
We've had some try to do some immediate exclusions from the classroom, and that would send them to ISS. But what we did with lunch detention is, in order to let the teachers have another tool in the toolbox for classroom management strategies. So beyond just sending them to the office or threatening to send them to the office, they can actually assign lunch detention, and it seems to help with the younger teachers. So,
And my point was, though, since we have a lot of younger, inexperienced teachers, are they still going through the student conference issue and maybe the parent contact before they resort to using the lunch detention, or how is that going?
my understanding is it's working. They before they put a kid in lunch detention, they have to document that and then notify Mr. Lusk and Mr. Franklin.
That's what I wanted to know.
Before they send them to lunch detention.
Earlier in your presentation, you mentioned something about $200 fine, and since we're in the city limits, to whom does that go in the city to oversee that fine and adjudicate it? Does it go to the magistrates? Does it go to
The magistrate.
the magistrates?
Yes.
They oversee that.
Mr. Officer Withrow, our resource officer, will write the ticket, and they will have a court date. When I've talked to parents, and they talk about it was an accident or they left it in their bag or whatever. And I was like, look, if you want me to come in as a witness, I can defend you at the court system and help you out. But at the end of the day, it's a ticket and they're responsible for it. And they have to go before the magistrate and they decide whether or not it's paid.
Superintendent Worrell, does that, this fine, is this an outgrowth of the SRO program that we've instituted here, or is that done independently of the SRO? I know the SRO guy writes the ticket, but how did this come about?
Well, technically, a lot of school systems are going to this. You can't say it's one school system or the SRO program. If you're on school property and you're vaping and you're underage, you get a ticket. I mean, that could be at a basketball game, a football game, because you're on school property and you're underage. No kid should have any of that contraband on them, period. Having said that, though, we could move to something like a teen court, but we're not there yet. But a teen court would help out with our kids now, taking care of that and not sending them to the magistrate before they get to that level. But we got a ways to go. But at this point in time, this is something that has a little more teeth to it, because we cannot have kids in school vaping, period. And we don't know what's in those vape pens. And if you have something traced with something that you have no idea, and a kid drops over, that is 100% preventable if it's not in the school. And sometimes a deterrent of a ticket from the SRO does help. Other times, again, it's that frequency. We hope it's less and not more.
Does this include other tobacco products other than vaping?
Yeah, because they're underage and they should not have it on their person.
I personally would like to commend you and your entire team or staff on the fact you're doing this through city government, since we are in the city. Before I retired, we had a program where we were levying fines, and it was going to the judge, not the magistrates, and he was throwing it out and made our whole program here at the high school ineffectual. So, and you're getting good cooperation with the magistrates?
Absolutely. To the point when in the LSIC, I had parents coming in complaining that they had to pay fines. And I was like, well, tell your kid not to vape.
There you go.
But, you know, it's a good deterrent. But yeah, they hold firm on it. And, you know, they've been very supportive. Before the SRO, we would still report it to the police, but it would take a little while. It'd take 2 or 3 days, you know, to get it taken care of. So it's a benefit of having him on site. You know, he can immediately deal with that situation instead of us, you know, because the officers in town, they have other things going on. It's hard for them to stop through them and come down here. But when we got somebody in the building all day, every day, it's a really good benefit.
Well, that's good to know. One last thing, comment I want to make here. Policy 4373, every board member gets questioned all the time by people who don't understand, and they shouldn't understand. They're just not in a position to understand about discipline. And one of the things, as we're on the air, we need the public to know and understand. Summers County board members, the superintendent, and the principals, we can't just make up the rules as we go and do discipline as we want. We are issued a policy, it's policy 4373. It's a code that's handed us from the state, and we have to follow it. Now, that doesn't mean we always agree with it, but our hands are tied on so many things. We have some flexibility, but we can't come down and be maybe as strict on some things as we'd like to be. And so we have to follow that state code. I think that's important for people to know and understand that. We need to communicate that to folks. We follow a policy, and it's a state mandated policy. If there are no other questions, anything else that you all need to present us? Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much. Very, very good presentation and very informative. Item 6, public comment. Do we have any, Superintendent? Item 7, approval of minutes for February 10th, 2022. That's regular meeting minutes. Chair will entertain a motion. Motion on the floor by Mr. Angel, seconded by Mrs. Farley, that this board approve February 10, 2022 regular board meeting minutes. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? 5-0 in affirmative, the minutes have been approved. That brings us to item 8, approval of bills. So at this time, I would like to ask Vice President McBride to handle, in my absence, the bills for consideration from McGraw-Hill and a bill that made a reimbursement to me for travel to last week's West Virginia School Board Association conference. And as such, under the rules, I recuse myself, and in so doing, I will remove myself from the room, okay? And when we come back, Mr. Brogan, you will do the same thing. So let me get out of the room before you start this.
Okay, at this time, I would entertain motion.
I'll make a motion that we pay the bill to the McGraw-Hill and Steamboat.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Let the record show that Mr. Duncan recused himself.
Thank you.
We have another bill for consideration. It's a bill that's been presented to us by the CSBO from R.T. Rogers. Board would entertain, Chair would entertain a motion to pay that bill.
I'll make a motion to pay the R.T. Rogers oil bill. Second.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Angel, seconded by Mr. McBride, that this board approve the paying of the R.T. Rogers bill. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 4 votes in the affirmative, and please note that Mr. Brogan recused himself and left the room. Also make that notation on the bills in consideration that I was associated with. 4 votes in the affirmative. Mr. Brogan, you're welcome to come back. There are several other bills. I think we have come through them. So any bills that are left, the chair moves that this board approve the payment of the remaining bills for the CSBO to pay. Motion on the floor of the chair, seconded by Mrs. Farley. This board approve the payment of all remaining bills. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 5 votes in the affirmative. The remainder of the bills may be paid. Item 9. Approve transfers and supplements. There are none. 10. Old business. Discussion, possible action regarding changes made to policy Roman numeral 4-J-0, personal leave policy. The board would like to make note here for anyone listening that this was a policy this board had rewritten by the law firm earlier in the year, that this was put out for maybe even been toward the end of last year. Is that correct? In June. And that it was put out for public comment at that time, and I don't think you had any, did you? Had none? Some teachers or faculty senates have asked that we revisit this plan, and so we asked that superintendent put that plan back up for review and accept comments. So I'm assuming now Superintendent Ward, we have some comments. So you have the floor, sir.
We received 18 comments from staff, and those were uploaded to your OneDrive from Denise, because those went to Denise's emails if anybody had comments. And in a timely fashion, she put it together so you guys could see them as they came in. But we had a total of 18 comments about the policy, and that's all I have to give to you, because my job is to get it to you. You have the job to say what you guys would like to do next, and that's all I have to report on.
Okay, the agenda item is under old business, and it does say discussion / possible action regarding changes made to policy Roman numeral 4-J-0 personal leave policy. At this time, since this is being brought up, are there any members who want to make any comments on this at this point in time?
I have a question. So
Sure.
Whenever this policy went out, I had just started this position on the board. And I don't recall the reasoning why those carryover days, the personal leave without cause, why those were not continued as in the previous policy.
From what I understand, it has gone from 6 to 8, and then the law says you can carry over to 4. So when Trey was putting this together, he went strictly by the code, the law. If I'm speaking out of turn, please remind me if I'm okay. So far, that is what I recall and what Trey went with. The other thing was, we did have a couple of people come to us from the cooks that asked about the $500 pay. So right now, if they miss 4 days, regardless if it's with or without cause, you get a $500 bonus. Now, there is a little bit of a caveat there. If you're professional, you get another $500 from the State Department, but the county's willing to pay $500. Everybody but me gets that option. So that's why the 4 days with or without cause. The thing is, people have to understand one thing. Nobody loses those days. They go into the sick bank with cause. Now, that's the difference, and that's where I think the hang-up is the people who did make comments say, well, I know I'm not losing those days, but those are attached with cause because now they're in the sick bank. But that's every state employee, no matter who you are. It's just a county by county decision on how many carry over. And past practice went from 6 up to 8. When Trey came in to clean up all the policies, he went strictly by the code and went with 4. And when you put it out for comment, I know you just came on, I agree with you. That's where that went. No comments at that
And
time.
I do remember at that meeting, I asked if we had comments, so that's why I realized we didn't at that particular meeting. Now,
Right.
I have read through the comments that we have received. A lot of the comments that I'm reading, they're talking about this being an incentive for teachers and something that we offer that our surrounding counties don't. And so that kind of offsets, it's a benefit to our teachers that offsets the fact that we can't give them dental or vision, you know. So I guess my question is, in collaboration with that $500 incentive policy that we have, or in conjunction with that, if that policy states 4 days, so if we go back to allowing them to carry 2 days over, and they were to use 6 days the next year, that would knock them out of the $500. Is that correct?
Yes. Anything 4 and under, I don't care if it's with or without.
Yeah.
We just made an agreement that we're not gonna track that. It's easier just to track, did you use 4 or not?
Right.
Yeah. And we were trying to be understanding, because when you have the service personnel say, well, the teachers still get that from the state, but we don't anymore. I thought, well, I can bring it up to the board. Those are the comments that you get like you guys have tonight, where you have to have a healthy discussion and say, well, 1, can we afford it? And 2, why aren't we doing that? And then you start finding out with research why it got to that point. Because, you know, boards of education's changed, and so does administration, and then you ask yourself, nobody in the room knows why. Kind of like all the policies that haven't been touched in 40-some years.
So if, I guess I'm trying to figure out is there a downside to carrying 2 days over, allowing them to carry 2 days over?
I don't know if there's an upside or a downside. You get into a situation of how the calendar works. Right now, we do have a calendar committee. We try to work with people. They basically have 3 sets of a week of vacation that they don't technically get paid for, but they get paid throughout the 12 months when you spread out a 200-day contract. You also get the holidays off. When there's a 2-hour or 3-hour delay, they get paid a full day's work. If there's 5 snow days, you get paid those 5 snow days and you don't have to make them up. You can get into those kind of conversations. I'm not trying to steer you one way or the other. You asked the question. It's really just all debatable in how you perceive things. I think the stuff that the people brought forward, I'm not saying it isn't good or bad. It's just, at one point it was 4, well actually it was 3, then the state moved to 4, then the county started making their adjustments how they wanted to do it. That's kind of where we are today. I know that didn't give you an answer, but I just want to try to help with your thinking one way or the other, because you have me all year no matter what, so it doesn't affect me at all.
The legality is clear that the board can adjust this policy to the number of days that the board sees fit. Is that correct?
Yeah, but at the same time, you're talking 200 days, and if they take their days, you're looking at, on average, about 180 to 170 work days out of the 200 when people start taking days off. Now, there are some people that just never missed. I think one I can tell you off the top of my head is Bo from the busing. I think he has never taken a day off, right?
Right.
Okay, that's that end of the spectrum, and there's people who abuse, and there's everybody in between. But that's a decision for each local board to make. Okay, do I say 4, 6, 8? But you have to be careful with that, because you get into a situation where you can't staff that many people, then you have to start shutting down a school building or a district if you can't find coverage when you start looking at that. Then what happens is principals can be the bad guy, because they'll say, you can't go on a vacation even though you planned it for Easter break, because we've had so many snow days, we gotta make up those days. So you get into that because they also get OS days. And so that's figured into it as well. So really, they're getting a lot of days off already. Having said that, I do see the comments. I'm not gonna argue with the comments, because those people have legit valid comments. I'm not gonna argue that point, but I'm also not in a position to make that judgment call. I'm just here to let you know the questions that you ask me, I'll try to answer the best I can.
Every year, is professional and service the same number of days?
Yes.
So every year, you get how much time each month times 10 months contract?
Well, it's 3 days, isn't it?
No, you get day and a half.
I'm talking about for whether it's with calls or without calls.
You get 15 days.
Oh,
15
15,
days.
I got you.
Okay.
Okay.
15 days, of which 3 can be personal leave, 4 can be personal leave.
The
Okay.
state moved it to 4.
Okay, that's right. I've been retired for a little bit. So of that, you get 4, which with the permission of the building principal, you can say, hey, I have these personal leave days. I would like to, want to see if it's okay if I can be gone for this period of time. Okay. And what we're being asked to do here is, in the comment section by personnel, they're asking that those 4 days within the policy we have be increased anywhere from 4 to 6 to 8. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's basically moving to 6 or 8, because they already get the 4.
Ms. Crook, do you recall previous to the state saying you get 4 each year instead of 3? Was it that you could carry over, say you didn't take any personal leave days, you could carry over and have 6 the next year? Okay.
And then they made the law for the 4 days, and we ended up that year, we changed the policy so they would have 7 days. And then after it changed to 4, we changed it to the 8 days.
Okay.
So the carryover on the current policy, or the carryover on the current policy, when it's carried over to the next year, it becomes sick leave.
Correct.
Yes, if you carry it over, you can carry it over the next year the way it used to be. You could have 6 days that next year for just personal leave with no illness.
Without cause, and
That's
according
right.
to the policy.
Or if you don't use them then that next year, then they become sick days and employees do not lose that.
But the other thing is the comment section also talked about the sick days, that it used to be 5 days that you could take sick, but then you need a doctor's note. The policy went to 3 days and you need a doctor's note. That was the other comments. It's not just the without cause, there was the with cause. I just want you to know that don't forget that too. It's all encompassed under this policy, just to help you guys out with and without cause.
And was that, moved from 5 days to 3 days based on, state laws? I mean, because you said he looked at state policy.
Yeah, it's basically boilerplate stuff. Now, you guys could make it 5 if you want to.
But there is the caveat that if you see a pattern, it doesn't matter if it's 3 days or 5 days. You could require a doctor's excuse.
Right.
If you start seeing every holiday, Kenny takes the following day off. So-
But there
Yes, I see what you're saying, yes.
are genuinely teachers who need that personal leave for things such as to spend time with their children or grandchildren on field trips and things like that. And, you know, that's even something that I read in some of the comments from teachers. And as a parent, I can see that as a very valid point.
The board is always very sensitive to doing anything that we possibly can for our personnel. And the point about our non-competitiveness with other counties is well made and well noted. Someone made the comment that the board needed to pay closer attention to our fiduciary responsibilities. And so as example for that, I'd like to ask you, Ms. Crook, not that I think we don't pay close attention, because we talk to you a lot, don't we? How could you give us a little breakdown on how you see the sustainability of this forwarding? Does it make any difference to our bottom line? Could you share anything on that, in plus or minus either way, that we could take into consideration?
While she's thinking, I gotta throw something out there. There were comments that were made that are truly not true, and I don't think anybody's trying to mislead or lie.
You're talking about on the comment section on the policy?
Yeah, when it was stated it doesn't cost the county, like tomorrow, I have 2 doctor's appointments. I try to get as many in one day. My sick day costs the county. If I'm a teacher and I need a sub, it still costs the county. People have to understand that when you go from county to county or state to state and you're allowed to carry over sick days, whoever you're employed with is on the hook. I mean, that's just how it works out. It all ends up equaling the wash a lot, but my point is, you can't say it doesn't cost the county. Now, it does, and I'm not arguing the point where that's the issue here. I just want people to know in the comment section, when they say it doesn't cost the county, that has to be taken off the table, because it does cost the county. Now, as far as her details, I'll let her answer those, but I just want people to know it costs either way.
Superintendent Warble, I firmly believe you that you're being truthful and that you're correct. Would you concur with your boss, Ms. Crook, that he made a true statement?
Okay, so there are a couple different ways to look at it. He is correct in the fact that it's gonna cost the county as long as we're able to find a sub. So there's different ways that it could cost the county. While we can give the employees,
You might need to get on the mic, sorry, so the public can hear.
I'm sorry.
That was Ms. Farley's idea. It was a good one.
okay, So there's a couple different ways that you can look at it. While giving the employee more days, if they're always just gonna base their days, let's give an example, like we do have one bus operator who's never missed a day in 30 years, that's never gonna cost the county, because he's gonna use that for retirement purposes. It will never come out of our bottom line. However, if you have somebody who, they receive their 15 days, they're gonna take all their 15 days, we will pay those 15 days that they are absent for their salary, plus we're gonna pay a sub. So that will cost us. We are double paying for one position. Another way that it could cost us, not necessarily financially, but if we don't have a substitute in that classroom, because we do have a sub shortage, where those kids can go. They could be split up in another classroom, they could be here in the auditorium. So there are different ways that it could cost us, not just financially. But just, even though we're giving the days to them, it doesn't cost them as long as they don't use them. But if they use those days, it could cost us. And
But it could also save a little if they use more than 4 and we don't have to pay the $500.
correct, and that is something that I looked at today.
Give and take.
Mr.
Right, it
Angel.
is kind of a give and take.
Yeah.
And we are looking at, some different times right now because we're dealing with the pandemic. So we have had, a lot of absences this year for the simple fact that if somebody's been quarantined, you have to use your days. We don't have any COVID leave at this point in time. But why you say that with the bonus, whenever we looked at the days today of how many people would be eligible for a bonus, we have 42 in the county right now. So that is pretty far for what we had thought about at the beginning of the year, but those 42 people will receive, as long as they don't miss more than 4 throughout the rest of the year.
So the question I asked you was somewhat loaded and difficult to answer because let's just say that the board made a decision to go to 8 days total. It's really difficult for you to put a bottom line on what that cost may or may not be.
Correct.
Not too far in the distant past, it was 6 days.
Correct.
Currently, it is 4. And we know what's being asked for. Have we explored this enough to everyone's satisfaction? Does anyone else have some questions they'd like to ask?
I just have one other comment to clarify another comment that was made out there. When a teacher or any staff goes to professional development, they do not use their personal days. They are granted to go there as long as the principal says they are okay to go and a sub is provided. Therefore, that is not a cost to that teacher as far as their personal days. There was a couple comments that were put out there, and I don't want people to think we make people charge a sick day or a personal day to go get educated. That is not the truth. We have title money. We also have our own money that we have to cover that. And I can tell you, sub costs can be really expensive when you look at it. The county the size of Greenbrier, when I was a RESA director, it can cost the county that size around $1 million for subs. And I'm not saying people don't deserve their days off or their mental wellness or vacation or go see their grandchild perform somewhere else. My point is, you just have to look at the cost of education and how it works, because this is the part of the business nobody likes, is when you start discussing money and then what people want to do with their family or their loved ones. I'm not putting a price tag on that, but people have to understand, we don't make them take a day when it comes to professional development of any kind. That does not happen. It would be illegal and we could go to jail for that kind of stuff.
Tuesday will be March 1st. I'm assuming that our consideration of this would be centered around a consideration of what we might change it to for effective for 22-23 school year, correct?
Yeah, you have time.
Members, I see this, I see we are at a point, there's no other comments or questions. A member could put forth a motion to, in other words, if we don't do anything, there's no need to put any on because we have a policy in force. If a member wanted to see this policy changed, they could put forth a motion and with a second and discussion and then a up and down vote on it. That's one option. Or we could have this under old business on the February 10th meeting if members would like to have a little more time to contemplate on this. March 10th, I'm sorry. So, I'm not hearing anything, and that's okay. You don't have to say anything. Since I'm not hearing anything, I'll take it upon myself to, you have something, Mr. Angel? Go ahead.
I would like to make a motion that we do readdress this policy, that we have Trey look at this policy again, and that we consider the comments that we had in the redrafting of this policy, whether it go back to the content that was previously there, or whether we come up with a different scenario.
Do you have any time stamp on that as to when you would like to do that, or is your motion simply that we would like to ask the attorney to look at this, possible changes, and we have a discussion at a later time?
Yes, and as you mentioned, I think this will be for the 2022-2023.
That is correct.
So that gives us
Time.
for him to look at the policy, us to review the policy, put it out for comment, and then accept it or not.
So would you like yourself or would you like the board president to have communication with the superintendent, with the attorney, and have a report back to you? Is that, okay? Would you then, for May, restate that motion, please, so I make sure I got it straight?
I'd like to make a motion that we put policy 4-J-0 personal leave policy. We send that back to the lawyer for possible later change based on the comments that were provided to us.
For a possible. The chair would so second that motion. Is there any discussion? All in favor that the motion before us stating that the board president and the superintendent confer with the attorney and look at possibilities and then report back at a later date. All in favor of that, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 5 votes in affirmative. Superintendent Warren, you and I will have a conversation with our attorney. We will look at all the possible changes for consideration and make sure everything we're doing is legal and that we're being financially responsible, okay? To the best we can determine, Ms. Crook. So that's 5 votes in affirmative, and the chair and the superintendent will add this on the agenda at the appropriate time after we've had time to discuss this with the attorney. Everybody good with that? Okay. That brings us to new business purchases over $20,000. There are none. Discussion, possible action to approve step increase. Is that Selena Foster? Is that what
Yes,
I
sir.
said? Okay, Superintendent Warble, go ahead.
Basically, the law states now if you teach math or special ed, that they can get a step increase, and you have a copy of that paper in your folder to see that. I don't want to insult your intelligence and read this to you, but basically anybody that gets a certificate in math and special ed and they teach it, I think the percent is over 60% of the day, because you get into some weeds with elementary, because elementary teachers teach all subjects. But if an elementary teacher teaches math for the most part of the day and they're split up a little bit, that would be the only caveat. But as far as special ed, this person is qualified for the step increase.
What's your recommendation?
What?
What's your recommendation?
To pay her.
step increase.
Yeah.
Because that is based upon the fact she has increased her education. She is teaching math for the majority of the day,
This
correct?
one you don't have to think about, just approve it because
Because it's math.
you have to do it. She's special ed and she gets it by law. She's fulfilled all the requirements.
The chair moves that the board approve this mandated increase that is also recommended by the superintendent regarding possible action to produce step increase Selena Foster, special ed teacher. Second by the Vice President, Mr. McBride. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? 5 votes in affirmative, Mr. Wardle. This has been approved. This is item 11C under new business, public hearing for the 2022-2023 school calendar. Superintendent Wardle.
Basically, you have two calendars before you. Ms. Jones is basically chairing the calendar committee. She's followed all the state guidelines. We had a couple meetings and I thought they went pretty well. Everybody worked together to make up two calendars. This is the process we go through with you all to look at this and the community to have their input. And we'll have another board meeting with these calendars where the community have more input. And then we also have this posted on our webpage for everybody to see. Calendar A, if I'm correct, yeah, calendar A looks like this school year's calendar. Calendar B is a little bit different, and it's not too much difference, but both of these calendars are the calendars that the committee has put forth. And we had all walks of life from our staff, service personnel, and professional to come together to have a discussion on coming up with two calendars. Am I missing anything, Ms. Jones? Okay.
The calendars are very similar.
One has the kids getting out June 1st, one has them getting out June 26th, or May 26th.
The students in calendar A would start on the 22nd, that would be their first day. And then the 24th would be the first day of the calendar.
Yes.
Thank you.
Basically, there's no action, it's just for your information. They've been posted on our website, and this will be before you at the next board meeting for any public comment.
So in calendar A, there's 13 out of calendar days, and calendar B is 14. What am I missing here? What's the extra out of calendar day on calendar B?
There's an extra day added during Christmas on the 23rd. Instead of just getting the week off during Christmas, the committee
Okay.
and calendar to get off. on the
I didn't see
23rd.
that color between the red and yellow. Thank you.
Trust me, Mr. Angel, you're not the only one. You get, this is a math problem here, you gotta get it right, I know. And I'm only trying to bring levity, because last year, I remember one of our teachers had this all worked out, and we caught it during the committee. I felt so bad for her, because she really thought she brought one to the table. But when you're off one day, it literally throws the whole calendar year off, so. I thought this year went pretty smooth. Everybody seemed to have good input, so Ms. Jones needs to be commended, because it's hard for me to sit in these meetings, so I just let her run them. She does a great job.
Mr. Angel, it's always, trust me, no matter what choice is made, it's a headache.
It is, that's for sure. Now, so snow days are built into this. Will there be days that are, the out of calendar days cannot be taken?
That's
Is that correct?
That's correct. We use the equivalent time option,
Okay,
which adds 30 minutes of instructional time
right,
at each school.
okay.
So that gives us 5 snow days with no work at home that has to be done. That also gives us early out, delays, faculty senate. And then also, when you all approve this in March, on March also submit a non-instructional, traditional time application, and that gives us 5 more snow days, and that's the snow days that the kids work on packets and Google Classroom.
Now, the OS days at the end of each calendar, are those days that can be made up if we miss more than those 10 days?
Yes,
Okay.
we can use those after 10.
So we could go, if we were of calendar B, we could be going as long as July, June.
That's correct.
And every hunting season was taken into consideration when making these
Well,
lists.
we-
Absolutely not, we don't care, no, I'm kidding. No, that was one of the first things that came up, so yeah, we got that taken care of.
Coon season is covered.
There's 3 seasons, you have fall, you have, which is hunting, then you have Christmas, and then Easter. So all 3 of those get taken off the table right away. When I say taken off the table, those days are plucked out, let me just put it that way.
There's extra calendars out on the table, public.
Okay.
As I said before, no matter what decision you make on any item, it's a headache. But I have come to one conclusion. If we have to have a board member as a representative on any calendar committees, it appears to me that it should be either Mrs. Farley or Mr. Angel, because they seem to have a keen understanding of this. And I'd be more than happy to defer and turn that over to you. There was a great deal of consternation when I was a teacher, and so I finally just said, whatever it is, tell me when it is I'm supposed to come to work. So we've done all we've done. You guys, a public hearing on this, we've brought it to the attention of everyone, and it's out for comment.
Yeah, and then the next board meeting will be the same thing, and if any comments come forth, we'll let you guys know, because you have to know that before approving, moving forward with it. But then what'll happen, then it'll go in front of our staff, they pick A or B at that point, if nothing really changes too much.
That brings us to item 12, personnel items. Superintendent Warble, are we good to go with this as we are?
Yeah.
Okay. The chair moves this board go into executive session subject 6-9A-4, subparagraph B-2A under personnel. Please take your personnel agenda with you. Is there a second? Second by Mr. McBride. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? 5 votes in affirmative. This board is going to go into executive session. We will return shortly, hopefully, and resume this meeting. Chair calls this meeting back to order. Please note the time is 7:47 p.m. Coming out of the executive session. Item 12, personnel items. You have before you in your packet resignation, retirement, adjustment to maternity leave, administrative leave with pay, employment professional, employment professional extra duty, employment service, employment substitute teacher, employment substitute service, clarification of effective dates from February 10, 2022, personnel action. Please note that subject to the Open Meetings Act of 1970, this agenda has been properly posted as per the law. All of these names and these positions have been broadcast to the public for the required amount of time. You have before you the superintendent's recommendation on these items. The chair would entertain a motion in mass for all items, all recommendations of the superintendent.
I'll make a motion that we approve the recommendation.
My second.
Motion on the floor of Mr. McBride, seconded by Mrs. Farley, that this board approve the superintendent's recommendations under personnel, item 12 of the agenda. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Let the minutes reflect with 5 votes in affirmative. All superintendent recommendations regarding personnel under item 12 were approved. We are now at item 13, superintendent's report update on the athletic building on the football field. Superintendent Warble.
Before I do that, I want to go over an email I received during the board meeting. This came from Deputy Superintendent Michelle Black. If you look at the date, I always look at the dates when things come across me. That's today's date. It happened tonight. This is COVID-19 protocols. This used to be like a bunch of pages. It's just 2. So here's what their mitigation strategies are. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because the surrounding counties, Raleigh, Fayette, and Mercer, have gone to masks are optional. If you want to wear them, fine. If you don't, fine. That's including buses. That doesn't mean you have to wear them on the bus anymore. So that means everything is optional. If you look down here, face coverings at county board discretion. A lot of counties and states are going to having local control and saying the mitigation strategies, you can continue those with hand washing, cleaning up for any viruses, getting vaccinated, trying to stay socially distanced as much as possible with groups of people. But the key one is the face covering has been the issue. You guys can't vote on it tonight because it was not on the agenda, but we do have a work session on Monday. And I'm just bringing this to your attention because this just came across tonight for all 55 counties to look at. And I wanted you to be aware of our surrounding counties because I know this has been a little bit of a hot topic issue, if not. But I want you to be aware of that.
Clarification. The Raleigh County Board, a couple nights ago, they also removed the mask mandate from school buses. Is that in deference to a national transportation requirement? Were they allowed to remove that on buses? Just wanting to know.
I cannot interpret the Board of Education in Raleigh County. All I want to do is refer to county decision.
Well, we would want to know what the state's position. We were told before
That's the state's position, county. They're giving it back to you,
on including buses.
from my understanding.
Another county in the middle part of the state, I can't remember which one, they made it optional on school buses as well.
What I was reading on the CDC website, it said public transportation is still required.
Public transportation.
So are we
But
considering public?
based on what you have there, they're allowing local boards to make the total decision on everything,
That's
buses
correct.
included.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
the CDC will probably have new guidance, and at the State of the Union by President Biden, you'll probably see some things come out. But at this point in time, this is your guidance document from the state superintendent and their office, and counties surrounding us and throughout the state, like you mentioned, Mr. McBride, are making those decisions.
Will you include a copy of that in our folder on Monday meeting?
I'll just email you to you.
Email, okay, fine. The agenda for our special meeting on Monday does include discussion and possible action regarding mask mandates. So that will be taken up discussion in a special meeting. Okay, Superintendent Ward, go ahead.
The other thing is on the athletic building, Mr. Metter's done a great job hitting the road hard. When we brought him on board, he didn't realize how many projects we had, and you don't know until you don't know until you do know. And so now he knows it's a lot of work. And he's done a great job of trying to get bids in to finish up that whole building with batting cages. We were able to secure some bids. We had a guy come from Cincinnati. He was the one who won the bids. His bid was under the $20,000 threshold, which was great because everybody else was above the $30,000 mark. But they're going to come in. They're going to put in 2 batting cages. They're going to be 12 by 12 by 70. And then they're also going to help us with the first baseline. We have a net ready to put up. We got some donations to put poles in the ground. And sorry, Lawson, you can't use your splash sound anymore. The balls are going to stay on land now. No more lost baseballs. I mean, there could be a couple you can use them for. But on a serious note, that saves us some money. Baseballs, a dozen are around $100 for a dozen. And we do lose quite a few baseballs into that river. So we're going to put up a net that most of that is going to be donated, so that won't be any extra cost. But inside the auxiliary building, we're going to have 2 nice batting cages for our students to use.
Are they retractable that when season's out there could be?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, we have to, or it'd be in the way of everything. The only downside to all this that we've hit a little, I'll call it a bump in the road, is 10 years ago when the roof was put on, and I'm not here to shame, name, or blame, I'm just giving the facts and we gotta own them. We have a serious leak problem. We already had one company look at the roof system. They said basically that roof has too many holes in it due to the people missing the mark. Now, that's what happens sometimes when you let some people do jobs that are either unsupervised or done by youngsters. We'll just leave it like that. Having said that, Mr. Metter is looking at another company to give us a bid because we're finding that that insulation has been soaking up a lot of water, and what we're concerned about is like anything else. What did that water and that air create? Mold, possibly. So we're in a situation where we got to get some bids on that because we've done such a great job of upkeeping that place that we're in a position where we got to do this right, and I want to make sure we get more people on that roof to look at that problem because I don't want to do unfinished business. We got to finish it right, and it's just one of those things where life has curveballs, like Dr. Edwards talked about earlier today. So you got to be critical thinking and problem solving and try to do the best you can with what we got.
On those batting cages, and the question was asked if they were retractable. Is that are they easily retractable? So can we have batting practice from 3:30 to 5, and then have some other sport in there from 5 to?
Yes.
And that would all be out of the way? Yeah. Okay.
They're supposed to be on these,
Tracks.
they slide real nice.
Okay.
It's supposed to be easy enough for 1 or 2 to just slide them
Okay.
and retract them.
And they'll be against the walls, the outer walls?
Yeah.
There's an area as well that we plan on putting the archery wire, for lack of a better word.
It's reading my mind.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got the idea.
Okay.
Yep.
Was there a contractor that you spoke to and said something effect on the roof, there was too many holes in it? Did that contractor want us to do the job, and did they give you a quote on it or anything?
They're seeing that there's more damage, and it's the the metal is basically not good because of the holes that were put in it, and then you also have insulation. The reason why people haven't seen the leaks as much in the past is because it's been used as a storage facility, and it hasn't been, I guess lack of better words, used for people to see those problems. It's kind of like a barn. You got leaks in your barn, but you don't get too worked up about it. It's not over your feet or your animals. Horse and hay, straw.
So are we now getting notice that that metal has to be replaced, or can it be repaired, or you don't know yet?
So I spoke with Bob Worley, RW Electric. That's the gentleman that did the electric work around the perimeter of the school, as well as the lighting with the athletic building. I'd asked him to go on top of the roof and see if there was an opportunity to simply patch it, repair it. I spoke to him just prior to the board meeting because I knew there was going to be some questions asked, and he basically said, Chad, the roof is full of holes. I took some notes, and I'll just tell you what he saw. Full of holes, no closures on the eaves, no end walls, top of the sheeting is just kind of hanging in spots. Of course, we didn't, the roofing was not lined up properly. I didn't hit the pearl line. Ridge caps aren't screwed on, and there's just a lot of problems. So that was his assessment. He recommended to replace the roof and as well as the installation. Tomorrow, I will be meeting with the company, the Garland Company. We are going to be looking at Talcott Elementary just to see what we're, 5-year plan, 10-year plan for that roof. Well, I'm also going to request them to take a look at the athletic building while they're here.
We'll keep you guys up to date. This is ever changing. And Mr. Metter told me tonight, but I thought, well, I'm recording on the auxiliary building. Nobody wants to hear this news, but it's how you handle the situations. It's not the situations that come up. But I like to get it cleaned up and make it, you can't make it airtight. You get what I'm saying. Watertight at least, and ice tight. We have some insulation that's soaking up a lot of rain right now. I don't have anything else, but if you guys want to ask any more questions, I'll try to help you out with this.
Just want to make the point regarding that building. That's truly a multi-purpose facility which benefits vast numbers of kids. That is a facility now suitable for our archery team, which is a growing event here. It's also a facility for girls softball, boys baseball. Track can also use it. Golf can use it. Football can use it. Am I leaving something out? I think I covered most of it.
I think dodgeball, wrestling, tennis, you can do a lot of.
Certainly that building, there's been talk about adding a wrestling program. That building would be ideal for the period of time you have wrestling. Nobody else would be using it. It would be ideal for a wrestling practice facility. So having said that, that's a very valuable facility. I don't know of any other schools in southern West Virginia have something like that. That building got started about 10 years ago, and that was a grant from then State Senator John David O'Neill to former athletic director and coach Wayne Ryan, and they got that building started. We are extremely lucky to have that facility, and obviously we're going to have to do what we have to do to make sure, because it will serve our needs for our kids for decades. Okay. Anything else, Superintendent Ward? That brings us to the item under discussion of the next agenda. Do want to make note that on Monday night at 6 o'clock, this board will meet at the board office. It is a meeting open to the public, but it is designated as a work session. And primarily on that agenda will be a look, again, to exhibit our extreme fiduciary responsibilities that we take very serious at this board. We want to look at all the unencumbered CARES Act money we have. We want to look at building projects that can be done or renovation projects that can be done with that CARES Act money. And the board wants to look at that and have in our minds so we're prepared to make decisions on a sound financial footing. That is the primary thing. However, another primary thing deals with student achievement. So we're going to be getting, I think, Ms. Jones, we'll be getting benchmarks testing results in both ELA and math at both elementary and high school, middle school level. Okay, we're looking forward to that. Mr. Worrell, that's the two major things I'm trying to remember here this late hour. That's okay. The agenda's posted, so anybody wants to know, you can look on the agenda. Our next regular meeting after Monday will be March the 10th, 6 p.m. here. And there's two items that I would like to have under new business. It's discussion and possible action. Again, this is something that could have been on the work session, but we just didn't get it on there. So discussion and possible action regarding planning period payments for covering classes. That would be one item. Second item would be a discussion and update on substitute pay rates. So that would be to come under discussion and possible action regarding those two subjects. And that is the early things for the March 10th regular school board meeting. Do any other members have anything they would like to see on the agenda for the March 10th meeting? If you come up with something later, let me know or let Superintendent Worrell know, and we'll add it on to the agenda. Anything?
Is there still going to be someone available Monday to discuss the bus garage, the contractor?
Is that one of the items on there? I forgot.
You mentioned it last meeting.
Oh, the bus garage? We can't have, you're not gonna be able to take a contractor on because we're hoping that someone wants to do the job out of the two contractors, and both of them just felt like they couldn't get it in that time period with all the stuff that's being asked of them to do. So to be fair to both contractors, we extended it to approve it at the March meeting, because if we didn't work with them, then they were both not gonna get a bid in, and then therefore, you're still in a position of not having anybody do the job, and we'd have to rebid it. So what we did is we granted an extension because of the cost of materials are really hard for people to predict right now. And that's an issue that we're dealing with the school building authority when it comes to the addition to this building with the cost of the materials at this point in time. So we're just really concerned about cost of materials. And then the next question is, can you get them in a timely fashion? Because both the companies really do not want anybody to be on that premises except for people getting gas. And then Mr. Boone was here. Mr. Boone and a mechanic, because they need to have people off that property for safety reasons. They do not want anybody to get harmed or killed when you're taking a whole wall down and all that gravel out and whatever else is under the ground, debris, all that. So it's going to be a touch and go out there at this time. But those two companies, I hope they still want to bid it out.
So it would be in.
March 10th would be, yeah. If they don't want to do it, and they call us up, then we're going to have to repost it in the paper to say anybody interested in this. The problem we're having is there's a lot of food at the table for contractors. They can be real picky right now because we all have COVID money we're trying to spend. And I know Ms. Crook and I did speak to Joe Manchin's office with a rep in my office and asking if there's anything you can do is maybe extend these deadlines to pay out these people, because we're getting backed up with all this material we're trying to order. So an example would be a hot water heater that we finally got for Hinton area. We've been on the emergency one for quite some time, but now we're getting a new one put in starting tomorrow. I mean, we are really trying to get stuff in, but everybody wants HVAC stuff. Why is that? That's where the COVID money could go like that. So we are asking for as much help as we can from our local officials to help with extending deadlines, because everybody can get a job. If you're a contractor right now, you can have a job easily. It's your picking.
I want to say, regarding getting the bids in on the bus garage wall and other items that have been put out, we hope that those bids get to us from those there were only 2 contractors expressed interest earlier, and we hope that we get those bids March 10th, and I can't imagine that we wouldn't have them, because those contractors have been given the specs from McKinley, correct? They have everything they need. So I would think that by the March 10th meeting, we may have those bids so that we could act on one, accept and facilitate and get that job finally underway. And I can't imagine that it would be longer than, is February 24th the next meeting? I mean, March 24th.
March 10th.
No, I mean the following meeting. Yes, 24th.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that these contractors would have to have any longer than March 23rd to get those to the board office, and then we could act on it on March 24th. So having said that, I want to explain to people the delay on this. This is not a problem that can be laid at the doorstep of the superintendent, facilities, or anybody in the central office or anybody in this system. It's also not the problem or the fault of these 2 contractors. These contractors were ready to bid on this 2 or 3 months ago. The problem of this delay lays one place, and that's with McKinley and Associates. It took them too long to get those specs to those 2 contractors, and that's just the way it is. I back that statement up, and I think everybody will agree with me.
Well, just be careful, because I don't care if people come at me. You can blame me. There are a lot.
You're not guilty of it.
But I am guilty on one thing. I'm guilty like everybody else. We're flush with COVID money. We're trying to make upgrades to our facilities, and there are a lot of specs that have to be made. A lot of problems that these contractors are also having is the bonding. If you don't finish one, you can't start another project, and they won't get bonded. Therefore, it makes it more difficult for people to bid on jobs. I think that's the big thing, because even if we do accept someone on March 10th, they're not starting that job until all those buses are moved out of there. We don't have people in and out. So you're not starting it till school's out, basically.
I agree with you.
You know, that's the big issue.
But there's another item here, and the item is, we've already said it, there's all kinds of money out there. There are a limited number of contractors. We had an opportunity several months ago, had we gotten the specs, for these contractors to have these bids in, and we'd have them nailed down. Now, it's out there, and it's difficult to tell how soon we do get it done. I know we can't do it at a certain time of the year, but the bids ought to have been presented a long time ago. Okay. Any other items on the agenda? Well, then, Vice President McBride, you're on.
All right, I make a motion to adjourn.
This meeting stands adjourned.